The kindness that changed everything. There's a truth about goodness that most people forget. It always comes back. You just have to give time the chance to do its work. Rachel Bennett's life moved like clockwork, predictable and steady, the kind of rhythm that becomes so familiar you stop noticing it altogether. For years, she had stood behind the cash register at the same supermarket in a quiet corner of Portland, Oregon, watching hundreds of customers flow through those automatic doors every single day. Some were always in a hurry, tapping their feet impatiently as she scanned their items. Some were incredibly polite, offering warm smiles and genuine thank yous. And then there were those who seemed perpetually irritated, complaining about prices or wait times for no reason at all. After so many years, Rachel had learned to read people, their habits, their moods, their little quirks. All of it had become as familiar to her as the beeping of the scanner or the fluorescent lights humming overhead. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, something happened that would shatter the predictability of her world and prove that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples. A stranger's struggle, when dignity hung in the balance. Standing before her at the checkout counter was an elderly man, Harold Cooper, his weathered hands trembling as they searched through his coat pockets with increasing desperation. There was something heartbreaking in his eyes. That confidence you often see in people who've lived full, accomplished lives was now clouded with confusion and worry. His fingers fumbled from pocket to pocket, patting down his jacket, checking his pants, even looking in the small shopping bag he carried, but coming up empty every single time. The trembling in his hands made his nervousness even more visible, and Rachel could see the panic starting to set in across his lined face. I think I left it at home," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he was trying to hide his embarrassment from everyone around him. Rachel felt something tighten in her chest as she watched the helplessness wash over this man's face. Behind him, the line of customers was growing longer, and their patience was wearing thin. Someone let out an audible sigh of frustration. Another person glanced at their watch with an exaggerated gesture. A woman near the back of the line crossed her arms and shook her head. But Rachel's attention wasn't on any of them. It was fixed entirely on Harold Cooper and the dignity that was slowly being stripped away from him over what should have been a simple, forgettable transaction. For just a moment, Rachel hesitated, weighing her options in her mind. Then, without saying a word to anyone, without making any kind of announcement or drawing attention to what she was about to do, she quietly reached into her purse beneath the counter, pulled out some cash, and slipped it into the register to cover his bill. She processed the transaction smoothly, bagged his items, and then looked up at him with the warmest smile she could muster. "You're all set, sir," she said gently, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Harold Cooper's eyes immediately filled with tears. His hands, still shaking, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and a pen. With great effort, he scribbled something down on it, his address perhaps, or a phone number, and then slid it across the counter toward Rachel with a trembling hand. "My daughter, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She'll pay you back. Thank you. Thank you so much." There was gratitude in his words, of course, but there was something else too, a deep exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying burdens that no one else can see. And maybe the weight of a story he couldn't quite put into words. The price of compassion. Harold Cooper slowly gathered his bags and made his way toward the exit, moving carefully, as if each step required thought and concentration. But Rachel's act of kindness, as pure and simple as it had been, didn't go unnoticed by everyone, and not everyone saw it the way she did. Standing nearby, sorting through returned items, was Derek Martinez, one of her coworkers who'd been at the supermarket almost as long as she had. He shook his head slowly, a smirk forming on his face, as he walked over to her register. "You're too naive, Rachel," he said with a mixture of pity and condescension. "People like that never come back to pay you back. You just threw your money away." Rachel gave him a small, knowing smile, but didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that some things didn't need to be explained, that some acts weren't done with the expectation of getting anything in return. She knew in her heart that true kindness didn't come with conditions or receipts. But the consequences of her small act of mercy were far from over. Just minutes after Harold Cooper had left the store, Rachel's manager, Patricia Hayes, appeared at her register with a stern expression that Rachel had seen directed at other employees, but never at herself. "Rachel, I need to see you in my office. Now." A cold verdict. Walking into Patricia's office felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer. Everything was organized, sterile, impersonal, from the perfectly aligned pens on the desk to the motivational posters on the walls that felt anything but motivating. Patricia sat rigidly in her chair, her expression unreadable, but her eyes cold and calculating. The kind of look that told you a decision had already been made before you even opened your mouth to defend yourself. "You violated company policy, Rachel," Patricia said flatly, her hands folded on the desk in front of her. "You used personal funds to cover a customer's transaction. That's against the rules." "I was just helping someone who needed it," Rachel replied, trying to keep her voice steady and respectful. He was confused and embarrassed, and "This isn't about personal feelings," Patricia interrupted, her tone sharp and final. "This is about rules, and rules exist for a reason. When you break them, there are consequences." She paused, letting her words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the blow. "Your contract ends today." For several seconds, Rachel couldn't process what she'd just heard. The words seemed to echo in her head, but didn't quite connect to reality. Years of dedication, of showing up on time, of going above and beyond for customers, of being a reliable and trustworthy employee, all of it erased in an instant because she had chosen compassion over policy. But Rachel didn't argue. She didn't plead or beg for her job back. Instead, with her head held high and her dignity intact, she reached into her pocket, pulled out her employee badge, and placed it carefully on Patricia's desk. There was nothing left to say. As she walked out of the supermarket for what she thought would be the last time, Rachel took a deep breath of the cool Oregon air. Her life had just taken a dramatic turn, and she had absolutely no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of this moment. The weight of worry. When Rachel arrived home, she found her father, Thomas Bennett, sitting in his favorite armchair by the window, reading the newspaper as he did every afternoon. He was a man of few words, calm and steady, the kind of person who thought carefully before speaking. She sat down across from him and told him everything about Harold Cooper, about covering his bill, about Patricia firing her on the spot. Thomas set down his newspaper slowly, and for a moment, his eyes showed something Rachel rarely saw there: worry. But then his expression softened, and he reached across and placed his hand on hers. "You did the right thing, sweetheart," he said quietly. "Not every mistake is worth regretting." Rachel's younger brother, Tyler, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, walked into the room with his fists clenched at his sides. Tyler was known for his short temper and fierce loyalty to his family, and right now
That fire was blazing in his eyes. "This is wrong," he said, his voice rising with anger. "They can't just do this to you. We need to fight back, Rachel. We can't let them get away with this."
"I don't want revenge, Tyler," Rachel said softly, looking at her brother with tired eyes. "I just want to understand why the world sees kindness as weakness." Before anyone could respond, the phone on the side table rang, its shrill tone cutting through the tension in the room. Rachel picked it up, and on the other end, she heard a woman's voice, calm but determined, with an undertone of something Rachel couldn't quite place. "Rachel Bennett, this is Emma Cooper. My father told me what you did for him. I need to meet with you. It's important." There was gratitude in her voice, yes, but there was also something else, something mysterious, something urgent, and Rachel had a feeling that this phone call was about to change everything once again. The truth unfolds. Rachel barely slept that night. Emma Cooper's voice kept replaying in her mind, the way she'd said, "It's important," with such weight and purpose. The next morning, Rachel dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue sweater and jeans, though she wasn't entirely sure why it mattered. She didn't know what this meeting would bring, but something told her it was significant. The coffee shop where they'd agreed to meet was a small, cozy place on the outskirts of town, the kind with old wooden tables, the faint aroma of fresh ground coffee beans, and only a handful of customers scattered throughout. When Rachel walked in, she spotted Emma immediately. She was sitting in a corner booth, her posture composed, but her eyes told a different story. There was exhaustion there, and sadness, and something that looked like determination born from desperation. "Rachel Bennett?" Emma asked as Rachel approached. Rachel nodded and slid into the seat across from her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, exactly, but it was heavy with unspoken things. "My father has Alzheimer's disease." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. She opened her mouth but couldn't find any words to respond. Emma's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup absently, and when she continued, her voice was steady but strained. "For the past several months, his memory has been deteriorating. Some days he forgets recent conversations. Other days he forgets where he is or how he got there. Sometimes he doesn't recognize people he's known his whole life." She paused, taking a shaky breath. Yesterday, when he came home from the supermarket, he was completely disoriented. He couldn't remember where he'd been or what he'd done. He didn't even remember his own address. Rachel felt her throat tighten with emotion. "But he remembered one thing," Emma continued, finally looking up to meet Rachel's eyes. "You." "Me," Rachel whispered, barely able to believe it. "Your face," Emma said, and now there were tears forming in her eyes. "He kept talking about you. He said a kind young woman helped him when he had no money, that you saved him from humiliation, that you treated him with dignity when he felt like he had none left." Emma's voice cracked slightly. "In a mind that's forgetting everything, his own daughter's birthday, the house he's lived in for 30 years, the names of his closest friends. Somehow, you made an impression so strong that even Alzheimer's couldn't erase it." Rachel felt tears welling up in her own eyes. She'd thought her small act of kindness was just that, small, forgettable, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But here was proof that even the smallest gestures could be monumental, that they could carve themselves so deeply into someone's heart, that even a disease that steals memories couldn't take them away. "I'm so sorry to hear about your father's condition," Rachel said softly. "I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you and your family." Emma's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Thank you. But I didn't ask you here just to thank you, Rachel." She paused, and something shifted in her expression, something that made Rachel sit up a little straighter.
I need to tell you something that's going to sound unbelievable. The shocking revelation. Emma took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for what she was about to say. My father, Harold Cooper, he's one of the co-owners of that supermarket. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Rachel stared at Emma, certain she must have misheard. But Emma's expression was deadly serious. What? Rachel finally managed to whisper. Yes, Emma said, her voice now tinged with anger, not at Rachel, but at the situation. The supermarket where you worked, where you were fired for helping my father, is partially owned by my father.
It's part of his investment portfolio, one of several properties he owns throughout the state. Rachel felt like she couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin around her. When my father came home yesterday and kept talking about you, I had a feeling something wasn't right. Emma continued. I called the store to ask some questions, and that's when I learned that an employee named Rachel Bennett had been terminated that very same day. So I requested the security footage. Her jaw tightened. I watched everything. I saw you help my father. I saw you pay for his groceries without hesitation. And then I saw Patricia Hayes call you into her office just minutes later and fire you without a second thought. She didn't know who he was, Rachel said weakly, though she wasn't sure why she was defending Patricia. No, she didn't, Emma agreed, her voice hard. Patricia Hayes had no idea that the man you helped was one of her actual employers. She fined you for showing compassion to the man who signs off on her salary. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Rachel's hands were shaking now. Why are you telling me this? For the first time since they'd sat down, Emma smiled, a small, determined smile that reminded Rachel somehow of her father's grateful expression in the supermarket. Because I'm not going to let this injustice stand, Emma said firmly. You're going to see, Rachel. Very soon, you're going to see what real justice looks like. A new beginning. 2 days ago, Rachel Bennett had been an ordinary cashier who lost her job for doing the right thing. Now, as she stood outside the supermarket's entrance, her heart pounding in her chest, she could barely comprehend what was about to happen. Emma stood beside her, radiating quiet confidence. Ready? She asked. Rachel nodded, though she wasn't sure she'd ever be ready for this. When she walked through those automatic doors, every single person in the store turned to look at her. The cashiers at their registers, the stock clerks arranging produce, the customers browsing the aisles, all of them seemed to freeze in place, their eyes wide with shock and confusion. Some looked surprised. Others looked like they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. And some, like Derek Martinez, who was standing near the customer service desk, looked downright uncomfortable, their faces flushing with embarrassment. But Rachel wasn't walking back in as a customer, and she certainly wasn't returning as a former employee looking for closure. She was walking in as the new manager of this entire store. Emma led her confidently through the aisles, past the staring faces. Straight to the manager's office, the same office where Patricia Hayes had coldly stripped away her livelihood just days before. But Patricia was gone now. Emma's family had made sure of that. Patricia Hayes has been removed from her position, Emma said as they stepped into the office. She showed a complete lack of judgment and compassion, and those aren't qualities we want in someone running our store. Rachel looked around the office, her emotions a whirlwind of disbelief, gratitude, and something that felt almost like fear. Emma, I don't understand. Why me? Why give me this position? Emma turned to face her fully, and her expression was completely serious. This isn't charity, Rachel, and it's not just about making up for what happened to you. I'm offering you this position because this store needs someone who understands the difference between rules and righteousness, between policy and humanity. She paused,
letting her words sink in. My father built his business on the principle that you treat people with dignity. Customers, employees, everyone. Somewhere along the way, that got lost.
I'm giving you this job because I believe you can bring it back.
Rachel felt tears pricking at her eyes as she slowly lowered herself into the manager's chair. This wasn't just a job. This was a second chance. This was an opportunity to prove that kindness matters, that doing the right thing isn't a weakness, and that sometimes the universe does reward good people. You just have to be patient enough to let it happen.
I don't know what to say,
Rachel whispered.
Don't say anything yet,
Emma replied with a soft smile. Just show them. Show everyone here what true leadership looks like. The ripple effect. Word spread quickly through the store that Rachel was now their manager. The employees gathered in small groups, whispering, trying to make sense of this dramatic turn of events. Some were genuinely happy for her. They'd always liked Rachel and respected her work ethic. Others were skeptical, wondering if she was really qualified for such a position.
And then there was Derek Martinez. Derek had been avoiding eye contact with Rachel all morning, but finally, late in the afternoon, he approached her near the loading dock where she was reviewing inventory reports. His posture was defensive, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, but there was something in his eyes that looked almost like shame.
"Rachel," he said quietly, I
think I owe you an apology."
This was the same man who had mocked her, who had called her naive for helping a stranger, who had laughed at the idea that her kindness would ever be repaid. Rachel looked at him for a long moment, then gave him a small, understanding smile.
"Maybe you did, Derek. Maybe you did."
"I was wrong about you," he continued, the words clearly difficult for him to say. "I thought you were being foolish. I didn't understand that what you did was actually brave." Rachel nodded slowly. "We all make judgments, Derek. The important thing is that we learn from them." Derek gave a short nod, then turned and walked away, but Rachel could see his shoulders relax slightly, as if a weight had been lifted. That evening, as Rachel was closing up the store, the phone buzzed with a new message. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. "Rachel, I forget many things now, but I will never forget you. Thank you, Harold Cooper." Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she stood there in the empty store, the fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. She typed back slowly, carefully, making sure every word was exactly right. "I will never forget you either, Mr. Cooper. Thank you for reminding me that kindness is never wasted. The lesson that echoes forever." 3 months have passed since that extraordinary day, and Rachel Bennett has transformed not just the supermarket, but the entire culture within its walls. She implemented new training programs that emphasize compassion alongside efficiency. She created a discretionary fund that allows employees to help customers in genuine need without fear of punishment. She hangs a simple sign behind every register that reads, "Treat every customer like family." Harold Cooper visits the store sometimes, always accompanied by Emma or a caregiver. On his good days, he recognizes Rachel and gives her a warm smile. On his difficult days, when the fog of Alzheimer's clouds his mind, he doesn't remember her name or face. But even then, Emma says, he talks about a kind woman who once helped him when he needed it most. Derek Martinez, who once scoffed at compassion, now volunteers at a local shelter on weekends. Patricia Hayes never returned to retail management, and rumor has it she's doing consulting work from home. And Rachel? Rachel Bennett wakes up every single day, grateful for the reminder that the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples. That goodness always finds its way back to you. And that, sometimes, losing everything is exactly what you need to gain something far more valuable. Because here's the truth that Rachel learned and wants to share with all of us. Goodness, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, is never forgotten. It plants seeds in people's hearts that grow in ways we can never predict. It changes lives, sometimes the life of the person you help, sometimes your own life, and sometimes the lives of everyone watching. The world desperately wants you to believe that kindness is weakness, that compassion makes you vulnerable, that helping others without expecting anything in return makes you a fool. But Rachel knows better now. She knows that her one moment of mercy, paying for an elderly man's groceries when he'd forgotten his wallet, set in motion a chain of events that would restore not just her own dignity, but remind an entire community what really matters in this life.
So the next time you have the opportunity to help someone, even in the smallest way, don't hesitate. Don't calculate what you'll get in return. Don't worry about whether they deserve it or whether they'll remember. Just help. Because kindness has a memory longer than any disease, any hardship, any darkness this world can throw at us. And sometimes, when you least expect it, when you've lost everything and feel like giving up, that kindness will circle back around and lift you higher than you ever imagined possible. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of a time when someone showed you unexpected kindness, or if it inspired you to be that person for someone else, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and share your story of kindness, either a time when someone helped you, or a time when you helped someone else. Let's create a thread of hope and compassion that reminds everyone watching that goodness still exists in this world. And if you believe that stories like this need to be shared, that the world needs more reminders about the power of compassion, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe someone who's lost faith in humanity, or someone who's going through a difficult time and needs to be reminded that better days are coming. Remember, you never know when your smallest act of kindness will become someone's biggest memory. You never know when paying it forward will pay you back in ways you never dreamed possible. So go out there and be the Rachel in someone else's story. Be the person who chooses compassion over policy, humanity over rules, and love over indifference. Because at the end of the day, goodness always comes back. Always. You just have to give time the chance to do its work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, be kind, be brave, and never underestimate the power of a generous heart.